Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Oliver and Sam. I look forward to this little discussion, and I'll just jump right into it so that we can get some great storytelling going. So, Oliver, let's start kind of from the beginning. The journey always has the beginning. And I would say, right, finding the right technology is really never an easy process. And your journey kind of had some twists and turns along the way. So can you share a little bit about that, and maybe what led you to search to begin with for new technologies, and how have different stakeholders kind of reacted throughout the process and throughout that journey? And really, I think probably, you know, what everybody kind of wonders is, how did you manage to get these modern technologies, right, into and introduce them to a company that's so complex and large like SAP?
Yeah. Let's start with the beginning, okay, before I just take you all the path. So I'm technically leading the SAP Community platform, so I'm the technical owner of the SAP Community platform. And SAP Community consists of various individual pieces, and our landing area is community.sap.com, and that's where we have the homepage, search, but also editorial content, topic pages, and sort of guidance through the community. And that's heavy editorial content very often. And this was what we have now with community.sap.com. That's all built on the new stack. But we came from a different place where also from an experience-wise, that was part of the general sap.com experience, and so www.sap.com. And there we have a full stack content management system, a monolith, and we were part of that. And there were definitely a journey with, there are different requirements from how marketing product pages, for example, are being managed, then to something that is much more dynamic, where a content editor would go into certain resource pages on the community and maybe update them on a daily basis, right? Put featured content in there, or restructures data, or put new links into new documentations. So there were definitely different user roles, user types with different requirements on how this content would be managed. And with the stuff that we had there, with the content management system that was in place, there were definitely struggles. So the content editors weren't really that happy with the whole experience. It basically, a lot was around the publishing process, which was very cumbersome. Lots of manual steps in between, not really fully automated. So getting quickly content edits out into the productive environment was usually a multi-stage process, and because the whole process was not designed towards that specific user group. And also, when you're in such a monolith content management system, you often have this, there's the content management part. It's often very much entangled with all the rest that is hanging off there, right? It's sort of from a user experience perspective, you look at this and it just says, we really want to touch this. It looks enterprise heavy. And we were looking for basically for something else. Other teams were exploring, playing with content management systems, with headless content management systems internally. We had actually, I'm not sure actually I ever told you, but you probably should know, there was a partnership between the Cloud Portal and Contentstack, where the Cloud Portal product is in parts using Contentstack as a content management system. So we got noticed from that side and said, oh, there is already a partner on board that has, that there's a product in place from a partner of us that we should probably look into. And that's how we discovered Contentstack, right? That's how we got in contact with you, and where we really started looking into, okay, right, what could be the possible stack there? Actually, a colleague of mine pointed me towards Gatsby and said, you know, if you're looking into that content management system, a headless content management system, you should probably look into Contentstack, into Gatsby, because that's really a nice fitting framework that would probably solve many of your problems. Right? So, and we went into that discovery phase. And then when it finally came to fruition, where suddenly this became an urgent topic to get solved, right? An urgent problem to get solved, we went from that sort of on the side discovery phase, where we were still, of course, working on all the other stuff that we had to deliver for the community, more into a, okay, now there's a limited time. We have to get this done first for a end-to-end demo, proof of concept or prototype, but for it was more proof of concept, just this can get the job done. And we had a limited time, 10 days, where we said, okay, team, heads down. I mean, not the whole team, but it was like one architect, system engineer, designer, front-end developer, and myself, but I didn't do that much. But it was sort of very limited team. And we knew the pieces we wanted to pick just from a technical stack perspective, and had to put it together into really a end-to-end user journey. Right? So the demo was to our content editors, and they wanted to see what is the new stack, how are we going to manage our content in the future. And there was actually like two competing solutions, but in the end, they picked us, which is cool. And it was really the focus on, okay, the end users here, the content editors, and you have to quickly edit your content in a really nice looking user experience, right? In a beautiful UI that is right, without distractions, and you can easily go into the content management system, right, into the content view. And then you want to have a preview where you can see how the changes are looking before you publish it into the productive environment. And then you just publish, and by a fully automated process, in a couple of minutes, the stuff is live. That was, okay, this is what we have to get done. And it was 10 days. We sat down and we got it done. And then we had the demo, and they really liked it.
That's just awesome. Going from zero to a prototype that you could demo to a lot of other folks in the company in 10 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned somebody that was site, so it was like a bake-off, which is typical, right? You have to, you have something that you already possess, right? And so the other solution was I presume there was monolith, right? That was the one that you guys already had in-house. So it was the monolith versus headless.
We have many CMS that we are using. I'm confident I don't know all of them.
For sure.
Probably build our own. Yeah, but it was a short time frame. So it was also how quickly the team picked it up from a technical stack perspective. Right, so Gatsby, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, React. Of course, in the beginning it was lots of workarounds, and it might not have it for sure wasn't beautiful code-wise. It was get it working. But the team, right, when they started working with it, I got feedback. Oh, this looks cool. Okay, this feels nice, right? It's the developer preview, for example, right? We have you build and you immediately see when saving the code, right, how that refreshes, and that feedback was really good, right? Because it really let us progress very fast on building out that initial prototype.
I think that 10 days has a whole new context. When you say that your team didn't have experience with the technologies that you were using before, I really think it sort of puts things into perspective.
Yeah, it sort of, right, it widens your view just from that single piece, right, from that perspective, because you usually would have to write some server-side code, and you have to run, and you have a local JVM running, right, with some service, or maybe some PHP-based or whatever, right, but it's usually fairly heavyweight. But having this very lightweight front-end solution was really cool. And then, of course, the content stack part. I mean, I initially did the modeling there, the content modeling, just from looking at what the designer created as a design, right, as a mock-up, just looking at the stuff, and I said, okay, I think I can do that. Went into the schema modeling and just, okay, let me see how this works, because I mean, in the end, it's an app, right? And if it's a well-designed app, you just go in there and you intuitively, right? So like, what, 35 years of computer experience, right? I think I should be able to figure that out. So I started just drag and dropping stuff over and discovering with the tooltips, okay, what kind of configurations do I have here? What's the impact of that? Right? Looking at the JSON with the output of the JSON, and then piece by piece. I mean, of course, somebody else took over very quickly, but just trying to get this started in an initial phase early on. It also felt, for me, it felt really good. It felt like a solid product for quickly building out a content schema and getting that working. Right? It was very natural to our agile way of working, from an agile software delivery perspective.
And your editors kind of seem to have had an idea of what that experience should look like. So how did they, respond to the demo and kind of prototype, and what feedback were you getting from them?
Yeah, I mean, basically, right, they looked at it and the basic feedback we got is, okay, problem solved, right? Let's build it, let's ship it as soon as possible, because we have that problem and we need to get it solved. And then let's move on. I mean, they are focused on their work, right? They don't care about how beautiful it is, or how efficient it is for us to build that, or how easy it is to build a schema. They just want to go into that thing, update their content, publish it, and move on, right? Because that's their day-to-day job, right? They liked really what they saw. I said, thumbs up. Let's do it that way. And then it was really building out the full solution.
Yeah. And what about, can you talk a bit about any challenges that you faced kind of along the way, as well as maybe what you learned along the way?
There was lots that we learned. I mean, for one, that was from a technical perspective, first time we really went into that whole serverless area, right? Thinking about, or how to use serverless. I sort of still old school developer, right? Serverless. There's always a server. Don't tell me there's no server, right? There's always a server. Somebody is serving something, right? But of course, and then you start to say, okay, I know what you mean, right? It's not server-side execution, right? We store some static resources in some cloud folders, and okay, now there are these serverless functions that actually execute code that are also sitting on servers, but you're called serverless functions. Okay. But I mean, from a technical perspective, okay, now there's a cloud solution, and we have to integrate it into a, for us, working process. And for us, from an enterprise perspective, so we have around 240, 250 editors on the platform that are doing day in, day out. I mean, some are more active, some are less, as usual, but that's a number of people, and we need to provide them an integrated process, right? And there's a cloud part, the cloud CMS management. There's our own internal infrastructure, for example, for CI/CD, how to automate all of this. And then there's, of course, the website, and making that an integrated process that is focused on the end user. That was something we didn't necessarily try it before. And there, it's such a little piece, it's such a little thing, but that makes such a big difference. The browser extension from Contentstack, how that just enables you to, with one click, directly go into the content page and being able to edit that. It's a super small thing, but it makes such a big difference because it's just seamless. It's no effort, right? One click, you're in there. And right, first to understand, okay, how does it work? And do we really, can we make maybe other use of that? And that little pieces of information that are sprinkled across the website with the page identifier and the stack identifier. That we also use then for integrating something else that's called Site Improve, that is doing just regular analytics on our site and identifying like misspellings and broken links. But you're looking at these different cloud service, cloud solutions, and how to bring that together. And that was definitely for us a very interesting learning journey, which was, it's sort of, you start to think sometimes differently about how to solve a certain problem. That was very cool.
And what was the impact from either a business or a technical perspective? Sort of after versus before?
Well, business side, they had one problem less, right? They could just do their work. The content editors, previously they were very vocal about this is not a good solution what they have, and they have problems with that. And after that, at least to my perception, they went quiet and didn't raise now any urgent issues anymore. They basically just continued doing their job. So that was the one problem for sure solved. The impact is we have about 150, 160 content edits per week on the site. So that's across these like 240 editors. I consider that a success. If that is, and if that part of the user experience is solved for the content editors, right? And key is adoption here, right? Oh yeah, it's so simple. I can just go in there and make a quick edit and get out again, right? It's from previously days from thinking about and then actually getting it into productive environment to, I think there's something I have to do. I just click in and then seriously like 15, 20 minutes later have that change on the productive environment. This is suddenly, it becomes effortless, right? And no dependency to anybody else, other team. It's completely self-publishing, self-authoring, self-publishing in a fully automated way. That's definitely, that had definitely an impact. So, and that has then side impacts, right? Content freshness. So we just have much more updated recent content on the site. That has a direct impact on the user experience for the end users that are coming to the site, right? And makes the individual pages more valuable for our community members. It actually improves SEO ranking. Even it goes even into that direction, right? Then of course the Gatsby general speed of the site. That was it basically from where we were before, it went through the roof. So at the moment, on average, we have scoring and page speed inside between 80 and 90. And right, we still see a couple of areas where we need to improve because that's some legacy that we are that we still have on the site, or we integrate, for example, with Adobe Omnichar and web analytics and stuff like that. That is usually also a little bit a drain on the page performance. And then from a just pure technical perspective, team perspective, the team, it's really fun to build that. We have our own design system where we build out the individual UI components for reuse that very well beautifully fit into how I fit together with Gatsby and Storybook and that integration with design system into Gatsby, sort of a little bit more on the technical side, but it was really an eye-opener to see how beautiful that from a technical perspective works. So it was really, it was on the business side, super well perceived and really worked out well. It for sure took some time to get everything over to Gatsby because we have over 700 pages now on the community, and of course not all individual, but I think like 24 of different page types, and getting that stuff all moved over while we also have to do all the other stuff. That definitely took some time, but it was really a overall really very good experience from very different perspectives, technically, business side.
That's great. I mean, fast time from content going live, like happy content editors, developers having fun, great page performance that's like, positively impacting, other business metrics. This sounds like kind of a great outcome for everybody.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask kind of what does life look like today? Obviously, after any major project, we always look to measure, and it seems like you guys are certainly measuring on both sides, right? On the business side, editor side. I think you were, when you start multiplying, the number of editors that you have to a couple of hundred, to how many edits they make, and actually also to different environments, because they like to foresee it before they, in production and so on. We mentioned there's, thousands of pushes actually a month, and pretty dynamic operation there. So that's really awesome to hear, because I think that their scale is always a question on everybody's mind, especially for larger organizations, right? And kind of how do you put it all together, right? How can these technologies do that, and how do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, where do we go from here? It's definitely very suitable for so the full stack and how we're doing that now. It's very suitable for a wide area of use cases. Mm-hmm. So we basically transitioned all of the community.sap.com domain now over to Gatsby. And in many of these pages, there's editorial content that is managed in Contentstack. But then also we moved all the other pages, like in the search front end, which is, there's no editorial content in the search, beside maybe the title or so, but you code that into the page itself. But that's also now fully Gatsby. And then with our microservice architecture and our central search backends, so it's all just API integrations, and really just putting the content dynamically in, and having very high quality filters in there. So we basically moved all of that stuff over to Gatsby, and just augmented it with Contentstack wherever necessary, wherever possible. From that technical part, where we want to go, of course, now is with Gatsby v3 that came out. That's what we want to adopt. The new Gatsby image plugin. That's very cool, because we look at the SEO ranking, we look at the issues that Google is reporting, and there's sorts of, and you can use better image formats. I think we can definitely look into that. For us, that stack has become the go-to solution, right, in order to build out any new front ends. Wherever it's possible. Right? We have other parts of the community on different stacks, and where this is not necessarily working, but it definitely makes us think about differently about how we build out front ends, and then whatever we else are going to build on top now on the community domain. Let's see if we forgot. I'm derailed. I mentioned that we have a preview. So we originally used the developer preview, and we put it on a VM and just used that for our content editors for the content preview. But that was never designed, Sam can probably confirm, to be used by like 10 or 20 people at the same time. So we ran into memory issues. So one of the important steps is now to adopt Gatsby Cloud and use the preview there. That's a much more stable solution, and we don't want to have the that additional burden of having a custom preview solution there sitting on our service and just move over there. And then there's, of course, the quite interesting Venus part, so adopting Venus. I've heard that is coming fairly soon. And that will be just adopting of a new front experience from Contentstack. So there's a couple of things in the queue that we want to work on. And Sami, it's really being that, taking that journey, being on that path, it opens up new perspective, and you think differently about how to solve certain problems. And you can even do that in an enterprise company. You don't have to be in a small startup.
It is possible. Yeah, no, I think that's, that's always, I think, top of mind, especially, in large organizations, just kind of, getting new things, maybe newer things that sometimes takes some time. And you mentioned actually early on how you found out, right, through colleagues and through what others were doing, and you've had really such a great success, I think, on the both business and developer side. I presume maybe you are now becoming the person that's being contacted around the organization for ideas, or at least for thoughts on how potentially they can use these technologies.
I'm trying to share the love, but I also try to always be honest and focused on solving the actual problem, right? So it's not like this is now the solution to all the problems that we have, right? I mean, with my experience, I look at, so, okay, what are you trying to do here? And then this is now a new tool in the toolbox where I can say, okay, if you're going into that direction, you should really think about, right, maybe look into this, maybe look into that framework. We have a license already. Maybe you want to reuse that, right? But it's definitely a really, really good tool to have in the toolbox. But there are so many problems we have to solve from so many different areas with a large company, that it's not suddenly the hammer where everything looks like an nail. What is the phrase?
Yep, I hear you. We do have a couple of questions actually coming in. So there is some questions from Martin, and he's asking, which CMS did you have to use before at SAP, the monolith one that you were talking about early on?
We have, so the www.sap.com, that website, we have, I think, 12,000 pages on that in over 40 languages. That's a heavily built out stack with lots of marketing integrations, because that's the marketing side. And that's runs on Adobe AEM Experience Manager. That's the monolith, right? And it was at some point a beautiful product when they bought it from Daysoft. But I think maybe it's our specific version of the product, but if I go in there, it never feels comfortable for me.
Yeah. Another question from Martin looks like about where you're sort of hosting and setup. Like, where do you host the site now?
Okay, so just from multiple components involved. For example, CI/CD. Because continuous integration, we have that, of course, running there also for all the other components of the stack. That's just internal network, Jenkins, Bamboo. So that was also an interesting challenge. Okay, how do we integrate that that external cloud where that content now sits into our CI/CD? But in the end, we can't call into the internal network. We are just calling on a regular basis externally on a like 2-minute base or so. We are querying for any new content. So that's the CI/CD part. And then everything gets built, and the pages itself, community.sap.com, we have our own Amazon S3 bucket where all of that stuff is being then served to the end user. It's just one of our S3 buckets, and the preview that we are still using, that's on our internal IaaS, our own infrastructure as a service, where we're just running that on a VM to our customers. So it's usually we have a fairly diverse, fragmented infrastructure usage.
That's great. But it sounds like you're able to spin up all the infra you needed, or basically all of it, with the resources that were already available to you.
Yeah. But I have also a very capable team and excellent DevOps engineers that know what they're doing, and they know all these newest technologies. And we have Azure and AWS and Google. We are not tied to any of the specific vendors.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. And another question that comes here was, I guess, kind of just looking at which other headless CMSs have you considered? And I know when we're talking about this, you actually did, you stood up kind of that POC on a different headless before, you kind of did it on Contentstack. So I know you don't want to name names, and I appreciate that. But I think the main question is, have you considered other solutions, and have they worked for you, or maybe why they didn't?
Yeah, for sure. We looked into others, but then also, and only maybe very briefly, because to be frank, once we looked into Contentstack and we had that internal connection, right, with that partnership with the SAP product, and we quickly made contact with you, G, and with Greg. And then, it's sometimes you look at something, you say, that fits. And why do I look somewhere else? I mean, I know Contentful in the meantime pretty well, because they are also located here in Berlin, where I'm from. We looked into Graph CMS, and we looked into maybe another one, but Contentful at that time, not yet. But it was really about the ease of use and the user experience, the available APIs. It just felt like a solid product, and there was nothing at that point that we said, okay, this is missing now. Even at the moment, I'm not aware of any specific requirements that we have in order to enhance the product. So sometimes you just say, okay, that looks beautiful, that fits, that's something that's going to work for us, and we go for it. So yeah, no, we looked into a couple, but nothing really made us as excited as Contentful. I have to smile, G.
So same question, I guess, for Gatsby. Like, did you sort of evaluate alternative options? Like,
I don't think so. It's sort of the same story. I mean, Next.js, I only really got to know after it. We had our design system. We had Node at work. We looked into Gatsby, right? We built out that prototype, and it's really about, okay, and now did we have the actual need to look into something else? I mean, what would have Next.js, right? This started 2 years ago, just to put that also into perspective. It's not like half a year ago. I think 2 years ago, the market was still a different one, I would think. Right? It felt still a little bit early on. So no, we actually didn't do any additional prototyping or investigation into any of the other static web frameworks. Again, it felt good. It was a very good experience.
Yeah, I think it's actually an interesting story that both Contentstack and Gatsby felt so solid to you. You were like, okay, great, we got this in 10 days. This is our stack, let's go with it. They felt sort of good enough to you to be sort of compelling to run with this solution.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot.
I mean, what should we have done, right? Then, okay, this works beautiful, but now let's consider also other options. What should we do? What else can we do here, right? Let's use a different front-end stack. Well, let's try out a different CMS. No, if there's nothing really to complain about, then let's run with it. And it was all validated by business, by end users. It's not like this was a technology decision. It was really focused on end user needs.
Yeah, I think you absolutely bring up a good point, and something, I think, different minds, right? You're right. In some cases, continue to look maybe interesting, but I think when you, especially, it seems, you really came from a pain point, and the editors really needed a solution, and you focused on the solution, and once you found that, you just moved on, right? As opposed to kind of continue to analyze and dream up, like you said, with what else to dream up. So I think sometimes when you it's not, sometimes we get stuck, right, when we're evaluating things. You could actually get stuck kind of in that analysis and what else, and and so on, and maybe even forget a little bit and there is a problem to solve, and to kind of call it, I guess, a win when you find something that works. So there is something to be said for that, and something that Sam and I probably often kind of think about, right? Like what is that, what is that process? What's that optimal process? How do we help aid that?
Yeah, and G, I'm sure you've seen this as well as I have. I mean, there's, especially like in large organizations, there's a few folks that I can think of that we've watched kind of evaluate kind of different solutions to kind of, whether it's the modern web or whether it's sort of like headless CMS, and they're like, well, should we go here? Should we go there? Like, and they're so busy sort of like looking at alternate options that they lose the momentum to go forward and replace their old sort of monolithic stuff with sort of the best way of building things. And I think, like, like ultimately, like, once you find the stack that works for you, it's great that your team was able to sort of just make such steady progress forward.
And maybe that, now thinking about it, that, okay, there in 10 days, there's that customer demo and we have to deliver. That puts such a focus on, okay, let's now hone it out. And maybe we would have run into a roadblock, or maybe we wouldn't have met the requirements, right? Or maybe it would have, right? Oh yeah, in the beginning, it all looks beautiful, but once we start integrating it, all falls apart, and it doesn't really make any sense anymore. But the further we worked into it, right, the more it made really sense and became an integrated solution. And then you suddenly don't look sideways anymore and think about, okay, right, maybe we should now start evaluating anything in addition. And in the end, it was, we need to solve a problem, and then there are plenty of problems to solve. At some point, you just need to make a decision and then move on.
Yeah.
And so maybe that customer demo was actually a contributing factor into making that decision that quickly and moving along.
Yeah, makes sense. I know, yes, you have an awesome coworker there. So I know that kind of seeing is, it helps put things in perspective. And I think every time we chat about this, you, Oliver, you kind of like to get to the actually showing really what this looks like, and just kind of what you guys have built. And so it's maybe a good time to do that, and we can use that to continue to answer a couple more questions before we wrap it up. There was another question, I think, also, how many content edits does the team do per day?
I can show that in the system. I don't think I'm going to spill any confidential information if I start. So let me share my screen here. Click. Okay, I'm moving that window over. You're seeing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the community side.
Beautiful.
So community.sap.com. Now all of that is built on Contentstack and Gatsby. This is that little browser extension that I mentioned. So
the window's a bit small if you're able to make it bigger on your screen.
Sorry, the window wider, or?
Yeah, you could make it wider. Yeah, that's I think a bit easier to see. Yeah, there we go. I think that's easier for folks to see.
Yeah. So here's that browser extension. So if I click on that browser extension now, suddenly that edit button here pops up, right? And now I click on that edit button, and now this is here the Contentstack instance. We have single sign-on integrated, and now I'm in that homepage, and I can edit the homepage. So if I now want to change anything, it's productive environment. If anybody's going to see that, I'm going to roll it back. I promise. Let's see here. Right, get started. If I just say here, get going, and my community resources. Okay, I have to remember that second. Save, and then publish. I just published it into the preview. I'm not going to publish it in production. So now I saved that. I published that into our preview environment. Now we have a small widget here that is called the preview widget. That's custom integrated, also interesting experience. How do you do a custom integration into a cloud solution, right? But that's also beautiful with just HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Now I click here, authentication. And now I'm here on that page again. And where is my, get going, right? There's the change. This is now the preview environment. And that's still using just the Gatsby developer preview. So we have just a Gatsby instance running there with a developer preview, and we use this __ refresh hook, right? So there's a webhook call against that instance that basically does that refresh in a couple of seconds. And that's what we.
An amazing experience.
Yeah, and that was. Seriously, that was the experience that we demoed to the content editors. I mean, from that perspective, nothing really has changed. It's just, and it has been now scaled out and made more performant. Yeah, and then the next is then you publish into production, and then the automation starts running and push updates all the web pages, or does only the delta updates to the changed pages and push that out into the Amazon S3 buckets. Maybe what else I can show you? So
there was while you're kind of showing that, I think it's probably appropriate. There is another question that came up and said, I guess the main plus for Contentstack is this editor UI that you are showing and the workflow. Is that correct? Kind of editing workflow.
Right, easy from a development perspective, right? Easy schema setup, right? Great integration with GraphQL, with GraphCMS, and from content editing perspective, this really very clean view here, looking at these, right? Yeah, you can think, well, this is not a WYSIWYG environment, right? I only see the content, I only see the text and the assets. But once you have the preview in there, then suddenly it clicks, and you can even have them running in parallel side by side, and then you just do publish, and then you suddenly, without a refresh, you see that it automatically updates. But having this really clean view, and maybe that's also how our editors tick, right? Enterprise company, everything German, right? Everything needs to be structured, right? No, not too much noise around it. And this. Right, each of these individual items, you click on it, it pops out, and then you go into the details. If you want to delete it, you do it here, right? If you want to move it, you do it here. If you want to add something in addition, where's the plus sign? Usually it's here. Well, it's kind of there, right? You can add additional items there. It feels very intuitive, right? That part.
And all the things that before, like with AEM, right, it needed orchestration, more of a collaboration between developers and editors to kind of get anything done, especially if they want to rearrange text right on the page itself and so on.
I only know it secondhand. It definitely has also advantages. For example, let's also be open and frank. Here, all these the design of these pages, it's static, it's written in code, right? It's not easy for somebody to go into the CMS and just rearrange the layout and move something along, right? You can do that by respecting that in the template pages itself in Gatsby, in Gatsby, and basically say, okay, right, we put an ordering here, right? Just by ordering the type, the content items, we rearrange them in the site. So you can see that with the tiles here on the community page, on the homepage, where each of the tiles has a certain position, and we can rearrange that by just changing the order in Contentstack. But of course, might something like a non-headless CMS has maybe advantages in the area of, okay, now I can really be very flexible with the layout and give that power to the content editors. But maybe sometimes you really don't want to do that.
What's approved on design, yeah.
Yeah. But maybe sometimes you really don't want to do that, right? Or there are better ways, because then it also becomes very complex, because suddenly, right, if you don't have a right? Or depending on the limitations of the content management system, you suddenly have to put a lot of more development effort into it in order to build out these, right, on the editorial side, but also in the end user side, how the content is being managed, edited, and then also displayed to the end users. Now, this is, for example, our S4HANA Cloud topic page. Here now it's right here in this area, it's all just editorial content. And then we flip here to the user-generated content, questions, answers, and we can filter that down. That is really a nice combination of, right, there's editorial content, heavy editorial content, and then on the other side, there is the user-generated content and how to bring that together in a single user experience. Yeah. And I saw there was a question regarding number of content edits. And
there were a couple of questions. One is kind of number of edits that I think you mentioned a little bit earlier in terms of how many publishes happen a day between, you know, among the 240. And there's another question that came in the meantime, which is, you talked a little bit about, you know, using the design solution also integrated here in the stack. And said the question is, do you find that having the ability to deploy design changes quickly helps reduce friction with the marketing team? Does Dev ever collaborate with marketing in terms of defining the content editing experience?
Content editing experience. No, with our setup, there is more or less a fairly strict separation on that. There's definitely, right, the UX designers engaging with the business side in order to identify, okay, how certain things need to be, how they need to work, how they need to look. And we have the user experience integrated in our development team, so we're using more a lean UX approach and not have some design team somewhere sitting there and they're handing over the stuff over into the development team. So there is a close collaboration happening. Yeah, but I'm not sure I understood the question correctly. I hope.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions. One is just kind of that design being kind of closer, I think, to the team. Has it also reduced some of the friction with the marketing team, right? That is always very keen on design. That's one question. And then the other question is, you know, how well is that collaboration between developers and marketing, right, when it comes to the actual content editing experience, right? So kind of setting up the content model and looking at that editor experience and kind of iterating on that. Do you guys collaborate on that? Do you get feedback from editors and then you adjust perhaps the model or, you know, capabilities that they have?
I think that's highly related to how you're set up in the organization, right? How strictly you have separated the technical delivery team from the marketing team. And if you have a very close collaboration, you can definitely quickly iterate, do small adjustments to the schema, to the template pages, and get them pushed out quickly. Right? So it's definitely possible. Right? Even though it's, oh yeah, there's definitely a tight integration between the schema in Contentstack and the implementation, the template implementation in Gatsby and the GraphQL queries that you're sending over. That doesn't mean you can't just do quick iterative adoptions to, right, from one state to another to where you want to go. The technology is not preventing that, only your organizational setup. I hope I answered the question.
I think so.
Good. I'm just browsing around here just to show the people.
I wasn't sure if there was something else you wanted to kind of specifically to show as we are wrapping up the chat here.
Is there anything in the chat I should see?
I think the other one was actually still, we didn't kind of hone in on how many, I think, publishes happen per day.
Hi, I just had that open here. So this is the publish queue. I filtered it down to 1st of March to 31st of March. Today's the 30th. So if I include the preview environment, we had like 2,000 edits, 2,000 content published, but That's basically the whole, okay, I do an edit, I go to preview, I review it. So only the changes to the productive environment, so pushing it into production is now around 550 for this month. And it's probably more of a typical month. There's then the big events coming up, and where you see much more frequent edits, and then there are the more quiet periods where maybe not that many changes. The thing is, it has been very well adopted. That's really key. And we never get any. I don't get to hear any issues about, oh, this is not working. Oh, we have a problem. Beside the preview instance, that's why we have to move to Gatsby Cloud, because there we have to fix that problem. I have to be very straight there.
Yeah, looking into the future a little bit, right?
Definitely looking into the future. Thanks for sort of walking the everyone around the setup, Oliver. I think it's great to both talk about kind of the story, but then also, like, I think as Gordon was saying earlier, like, seeing is kind of believing, and like, I think as you're sort of like, a lot of folks have a hard time sort of like visualizing how these pieces all sort of fit together until they like, see it in action. So thanks for sharing your setup and walking through how you built this all together.
Yeah, I would say, I think I have just last question for you, Oliver, right? You've certainly, as we talked about, went on this journey, and you have found what works for you. It continues to work. What advice kind of you would give to others, especially in large companies, right? In complex organizations, with a lot of stakeholders, and, kind of, what wisdom would you share in getting new technologies, getting modern technologies in place?
Solve the actual business problem. I mean, focus on the end user. I think there was a mind shift at SAP a couple of years ago, and of course it's a large company and there's lots of different areas. And if you would ask any of our SAP customers, they would probably say that SAP has one of the worst user interfaces you can possibly imagine, with our 40 years of legacy. Right? But maybe because of that, there was also already a couple of years ago, really a mind shift of, and we need to tackle this differently. And also in my area with IT, right, there was really a end user focus. We have user research in IT where we can go to and re-talk with them and discuss, and let's find out what the actual problem is. Let's validate the solutions with the end users. Focusing on the end user and solving the actual business problem is probably going to give you the best way of even getting some strange technologies or vendors or solutions into your company. You have to show the value. You have to show them that this is actually something that is solving the problem, maybe in a unique way, maybe exceptionally well, right? Maybe it's outperforming on a certain couple of key aspects that are important for the business. In the end, I don't think the business usually cares about what is the technical solution. It's more important, does it solve the problem, and how well does it do that? And if you come up with something that is maybe sort of unique, focus on the end users, focus on solving that problem. I think that that's the key to this, right? But that's the key to many problems, to many approaches, right? How you get and maybe in a large corporation, how you get something like this through the door and through global purchasing, through securities, through data privacy, through all the various stages of is it?
Yeah.
Focus on business results. I think that's a really awesome note to kind of close out this with and end on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we're seeing here is certainly a trend, right? That an example, communities is one example that we explored today, and thank you, Oliver, for kind of taking us through that. And but for Contentstack and Gatsby, we actually have many customers in common and companies that are actually been kind of on a similar journey. I'm gonna maybe touch on a couple, and Sam, you can maybe add a couple. One probably that a lot of us know about, Riot Games, and you know, they came also from Monolith. They actually had many Drupal-based CMSs that they kind of customized around, right, their business, unique business models with gaming. They realized that really the you know, way forward is standardizing on a common central platform. And they also went through a pretty lengthy review of different technologies and decided that Contentstack and Gatsby combination would be really best for them to deliver. And they are started with League of Legends as if they were really looking at a global site and relaunch of that, and then have moved to different other properties for them. And I think it was esports was one of them, Lore Archive, and kind of continue to grow there, and very, very similar experience. And then I think the other one that comes to mind is 8x8. 8x8, very different industry, but they really looked for a modern stack focusing on lead generation. So majority of their business comes through the web. And so really there was a focus of how do they attract more, how do they personalize that experience and really make it frictionless to use their product, which is where their customers engaged, and also settled on the speed of Gatsby for that experience, the ability to kind of continue to personalize that experience through Contentstack. So just a couple examples of companies, different industries, but to Oliver's point, right? It's focusing on that end user, focusing on that business goal. They've gone on the same journey.
Yeah, and from, you know, from kind of Capital One and All Simple, sort of like fintech companies, to, you know, Fastly, you know, we work more developer focused, and then also kind of more like more startup like companies as well. We just see sort of, you know, we see a wide variety of use cases, and I think Oliver touched on this there, both sort of user generated content and kind of official content. We see documentation content with some of these folks. We see, you know, specific properties like the League of Legends franchise. We see homepages. The number of kind of use cases that you can use the modern web, especially when you're trying to sort of broaden to the whole organization. It's okay to just start in the place that you are, build a great experience there with modern tools like Gatsby and Contentstack, and then, you know, and then it can quickly spread from that starting spot.
Yeah, so awesome moment here today. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. This was recorded, so I know that this is going to be sent out, the recording. It's also going to be provided, so for future viewing. There was also a session that Oliver did, diving a little bit deeper into the technical side of things at the Gatsby conference. So we'll share that as well in case you're interested in a little bit more behind the scenes on how these technologies were utilized and come together. But thank you everybody for joining today. And thank you again, Oliver and Sam.